All of it, as it makes news and it's live, we'll bring it to you. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra. A lot of news. Let's get to it. Well, North Korea's Vice Chairman Kim Young-chol, as I just mentioned, is on his way to New York City, expected to arrive within a couple of hours this afternoon. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also expected in New York after the secretary meets with President Trump at the White House this afternoon. The latest moves as the Trump administration works to hold that summit in Singapore with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. As of now, the date's still on the calendar, June 12th. The president canceled that meeting last week after hostile rhetoric from the North, but has since reopened the door to having it. A short time ago, we heard from former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Governor Bill Richardson, who is one of few Americans to have direct negotiations with the North. Here he is.
You have to set an agenda for the meeting, and we have to narrow the gap between what we consider denuclearization and what the North Koreans consider denuclearization. Let's be completely prepared, because the North Koreans, I've negotiated with them, they're relentless, they're very focused, and we have to be focused too.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts at the White House now. John?
Harris, good afternoon to you. You know, meetings like this are never a sure thing, right up until the moment that the two leaders get into the same room together. But the thinking around the White House here today is that the June 12th date for this summit really looks like it could be on track. The press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, yesterday aboard Air Force One on the president's way to Tennessee said, quote, the president's letter specifically said that we were open to the meeting at the time. And again, we expect it to take place. But we'll see what happens. We are going to be prepared. If it takes place June 12th, we'll certainly be prepared. If it for some reason takes place at a later date, we'll be prepared for that as well. A lot of people think June 12th could happen. Some people think might need to be delayed by a couple of days, maybe a week. A lot of whether or not this goes forward will depend on meetings that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is having with the man that you see right there, Kim Young-chol. He's going to be meeting with him in New York City, likely later on today, tomorrow morning as well. He is the highest-ranking North Korean official to come to the United States in 18 years, and likely that a person of his rank wouldn't come all the way here unless there was a good chance of putting something together. Listen to what the State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said yesterday.
This will be the Secretary's third meeting with Kim Young-chol. They've had obviously very deep conversations where they've talked about a lot of detail about what the United States expectations are. I think it's important that we're going up to New York. I know the Secretary looks forward to engaging him in New York.
Pointed out as well that the rhetoric out of North Korea since the president sent that letter last Thursday has been remarkably restrained. And Harris, the one person that we have not heard from is the deputy foreign minister, who really got things going when she said those intemperate things about the vice president and then threatened a nuclear-to-nuclear confrontation with the United States if these negotiations didn't bear fruit. So everyone playing nice at the moment. And again, the Secretary of State has met with Kim Young-chol 3 times previously, so they know something of each other, and we'll find out likely by this time tomorrow whether they can get something done.
John Roberts, thank you very much. So John sets up the conversation for us, Judge Andrew Napolitano, with the facts on the ground that things are moving.
Well, this general with whom Secretary Pompeo is meeting is also the head of their intelligence services. So he is the equivalent of what Mike Pompeo was when he ran the CIA. So when Heather Nauert said this is the third time they're meeting, this is the third time they're meeting while Mike Pompeo is Secretary of State, but it's not the third time they've ever met, because they met in the connection with their work as being the head of intelligence agencies. So they know each other. Here's the issue. What does and John Roberts pinned this, what does denuclearization mean? There's an American expert this morning who said it will take 15 years for total denuclearization. Will denuclearization, whatever it is, satisfy Donald Trump that the American public can no longer be threatened, but give Kim some ability to say, I can still defend ourselves?
Well, what's interesting about that, Katie, is that it buys the time for North Korea to figure out what that defense is going to look like that's not nuclear. And, you know, if this is the beginning of the conversation, that's just it. So maybe it just buys time for both sides.
And that's why you've seen President Trump repeatedly say, don't worry, Kim Jong-un, we will protect you, you will be safe, because the North Korean regime's entire premise for having nuclear weapons is to preserve the regime. It's not to preserve the people of the country, it's not to protect the citizens, it's to protect the regime of Kim Jong-un and his long-seated family in that position. And so for a long time, there's been this enormous gap between what the United States wants, which is complete denuclearization, what China wants, which is saying, look, you can push them to get rid of nuclear weapons for bad purposes and threatening the rest of the world, but we don't actually think that you can ask them to completely denuclearize. And they're on more of the same page with North Korea in that sense, where they're saying, well, we're willing to blow up a tunnel here, a tunnel there, they've done in the past, but when it comes to preserving the regime, it's going to be a very tough sell to the North Koreans about how the United States, an adversary to them, is going to protect them from getting slaughtered in the streets like Gaddafi was.
Yeah, and a broader issue, Kennedy, for all this, too, is we don't want them to be in a position to be able to sell those weapons to others who would want them.
Yeah, like his friends in Iran.
Yeah, but
exactly.
they've already been making transactions with Iran and with Pakistan. Unfortunately, that horse has already left the barn, and they're really comfortable with the international black market when it comes to buying whatever it is they need, whether it's fissile material or, other aids to emboldening their nuclear program, or, oil and coal, which they have gotten from China and some of their shrinking pool of allies. But, back to what Katie was talking about, this is a really specific dance, because it's like when someone is trapped in the wilderness for days and is starving, but they can't eat because they'll actually get very sick and could die. And, it's likely that North Korea will want to gorge on, the free market. But the problem is, if that doesn't go as well as they want, and if they want this deal set up in stages, and the beginning stages don't go to their liking, and they're not making as much money as they thought they could, and they don't have as much control over their society as they would like, they are much more likely to back out of future stages of the deal. And, that's why when people talk about preparations, they have to make sure there are stopgaps in place for the United States so we don't get stuck in another deal like
that. Because a little bit of capitalism
Sandra,
will produce civil liberties.
Yes.
And they don't
that's what terrifies them the most.
Precisely.
Yes.
Sandra, some of the things we're watching for, we know that there is that delegation from the United States in the DMZ zone. I mean, they have put, or DMZ, I should say, put things in place now that are tangible for us to watch.
I think we have to also take it to the right now, because we've been talking so big picture about this for so long, and now we're coming down to minutes and hours here. We don't even know the exact timing of the meeting that's going to take place between the North Korean dictator's right-hand man, as he's known as, and Mike Pompeo. But when I was talking to Governor Richardson earlier today, who has a lot of background knowledge on dealing with the North Koreans, he suggested it's time to let Mike Pompeo just take the lead here. The president and his team should just kind of sit back, let Mike Pompeo do his thing. As you had just stated when we let off the hour here, he's on multiple meetings now with them.
I once spent 3 days with him where we were doing seminars together. He is a very, very savvy, experienced guy. I'm speaking of Bill Richardson, who I think gives, in this respect, not Democrat advice or Republican advice, but good, sound, patriotic advice. The President of the United States needs to know in advance what the agreements are going to be. And if they can't get agreements done by July 12th, or June 12th, there's no magic to that date. And I agree with you that Mike Pompeo has to have a long leash, so to speak.
Yeah, the one thing I would wonder about, too, you talk about that relationship based on 3 meetings, but it's more than what we know to have happened in recent years with North Korean leadership. How important is it to have that relationship between our now Secretary of State and the foreign official who's coming?
Well, remember, that foreign official could be changed like that. Just that this is a dictator who not only slaughtered the boy from the University of Virginia,
his brother.
I don't want to get graphic, he slaughtered his own uncle.
Right.
But
there are
right
other
now,
family members who are missing as well.
Correct. But right now, the leader that's in New York is a 4-star general. He's the number 2 ranking person in all of North Korea. It's very important that Mike Pompeo, who has a great personality, bonds with this.
And I would add, too, that Mike Pompeo's experience at the CIA is not just about these 3 meetings he's had. It's about the overall intelligence that he has gathered as his position in the CIA, which we saw when he met with Kim Jong-un before he was confirmed as Secretary of State.
I'm going to step in here, guys, because I want to set something up that's about to happen. We've got the Right to Try bill. That's a controversial bill that lets terminally ill people be able to have access and to utilize experimental drugs that are out there that perhaps have not been looked at or approved by the FDA. This is something that the White House announced last Friday, and it has been something that the president has held as a priority, and for the vice president as well. You know, also what's interesting about this is that today, as the president, we're anticipating to walk up in the White House and step up to that lectern and then to the table to the side there and sign this bill. Today follows that rally that the president just had in Nashville, Tennessee, where he talked about taking a fresh look at healthcare issues. So as that happens live, we will take you there. Let's come back, though, to the issue at hand and talk a little bit more about what we think needs to be done before July 12th. Katie?
Well, I think
it's June 12th.
June 12th, which is 13 days away. It takes a day and a half to get there. So really, we're looking at 10 days that we have now between now and then. But it's important to go back to the beginning of this when the president agreed to meet with Kim Jong-un at the summit. They actually said at the beginning, we are not putting any agreements on the table. This is simply a first step. So there can be conditions that are put down on the table for discussion, but in terms of getting some kind of deal before that deadline, I think is ambitious and something that the White House hasn't actually talked about. Whether they're going to get there in 10 days, I don't know. Clearly, people are working
on the date and said it's going to either be June 12th or it could be
delay it
someday after.
I see no downside to President Trump to delay this for 2 weeks. If Mike Pompeo and this North Korean general are sort of on a roll, but just need a little bit more time.
Well, it's interesting because the president seems to be married to dates and markers.
That's the way he thinks,
and signposts, absolutely. And I think he sees this.
Well, I think that's also because you've seen a Congress that when you wipe away a date, they get nothing done. So maybe it's the experience of wanting to get people to do stuff.
More of a wedding date. And, you know, something that now has significance and now resonates in people's minds. And it's very difficult to postpone a wedding. You know, when you've booked the caterer and the band and you've already paid for the cake and there's still some love in the air, even if one partner has pushed the other.
The coins are out, Kennedy. The coins are sold out.
The coins are out. They're out. They're sold out. But I think this is, it just, it goes to the president's thinking that he is married to this date. And it will happen on June 12th. Or it will not happen. President Trump
slamming Democrats over immigration ahead of the midterm elections. Is this strategy that could work for Republicans? Also, the president is not backing down on his attacks on the Russia investigation. His latest accusations is Rudy Giuliani, his top attorney now, sets a big condition for any sit down with Robert Mueller. Stay close.
The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, ratcheting up pressure on Robert Mueller's special counsel yet again. Giuliani telling the Washington Post that the president will not sit for an interview with the special counsel until his legal team gets all documents related to the FBI's use of an informant on the Trump campaign. And just last night, the president continued to press the issue at that political rally in Nashville.
So how do you like the fact they had people infiltrating our campaign? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Never in the history of our country has something taken place like took place during this election.
But House Oversight Chair Trey Gowdy, himself a former federal prosecutor, pushing back against the president's claims. Gowdy was among a select group of congressmen briefed last week by the DOJ on their use of an informant. Watch.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Whoa, Judge.
So I was with him last night when he said that. We were on Martha McCallum's show together, and we chatted beforehand. And here's what it is. When he visited, or was visited by Bob Wright and Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein, the head of the Justice Department for this case and the head of the FBI, and they showed him the documents. They showed him the unredacted memos from Jim Comey. And in one of those memos, in the redacted part that we haven't seen, it said, the president said to me, I, the president, had nothing to do with any collusion. But if anybody in my campaign did, I want you to investigate it. So Bob Mueller has taken that instruction to Jim Comey as Donald Trump wants to know if others in the campaign had any communication with the Russians. That is what Congressman Gowdy was referring to. When the president says this has never happened before, this doesn't justify it, but it has happened before. LBJ persuaded J. Edgar Hoover to have the FBI spy on Barry Goldwater in 1964. Right. LBJ didn't need this at all. It was one of the greatest landslides in history, LBJ's victory and Goldwater's loss. But today, some ex-LBJ aides have boasted we had copies of Barry Goldwater's speeches before Senator Goldwater even gave them. I wonder what favor J. Edgar Hoover got in return from the president for pulling that off.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, and the president for sure was on fire when talking about this last night, Katie.
The interesting thing, too, about Trey Gowdy's comments about them not, the informant targeting Russians who were trying to infiltrate or influence the Trump campaign actually line up with some of the memos that James Comey wrote when he said, look, we were looking at Russian infiltration and propaganda affecting the campaign. We were trying to protect the president. That being said, President Trump's campaign was warned in the summer of 2016 that the Russians might try and influence them. They were not told that the FBI was using an informant, a spy, to gather information and to bring it back. So that is the issue. And it's been very unclear what that informant was actually doing, and I think that is the question that people have. Were they there for valid purposes, or were they there for political purposes, as we've seen with the other cases within the FBI?
I think you hit the nail right in the head, Katie.
So, Judge, can you speak to the issue? Is there any legality that would have existed that we didn't know that contemporaneously? Like, why did we only wait until now to find this? And by the way, House Speaker Paul Ryan has been asking that very question, too.
I don't know why we just found this out now, but the use of an informant, this professor that we're asked not to mention his name on air, to belly up to a bar and have a conversation with someone in the campaign is such a stunningly unremarkable event, because law enforcement does this all the time. Now, Rudy Giuliani said they put an undercover FBI agent in the campaign. There is zero evidence for that. That is such an outlandish and outrageous allegation. It should not have been made without showing any evidence.
You know this from last night, Judge, but Trey Gowdy made one thing very clear, that based on everything he has learned and that he knows to this point, that Donald Trump was never a target in this investigation. Listen to this.
Ray and Rod Rosenstein have at least made it clear to us Donald Trump was never the target of the investigation. He's not the current target of the investigation. Now, keep in mind, that can all change depending on what a witness says. But as of now, I think Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein are stunned whenever people think Trump is the target of their investigation.
Go ahead.
Target means that the government has decided to seek an indictment. Subject means the government is still investigating. The president is a subject. I don't want to give him agita, but you can go from you know what that is. You can go from a subject to a target like that.
It's that indigestion that
yes.
Get.
But what still strikes me about this is the fact that you had the FBI, who was so concerned about infiltration in the campaign, that they told the DNC that someone is fishing around your servers, and we believe that they have broken through. And they also knew that there were Russians who were targeting members of the Trump campaign team, but they decided to withhold that information, which is still very bizarre to me. I don't understand the openness with one political party or one side of the campaign, and the fact that they had shut everything down, because it seems to me that that's pretty serious. If you have Russians who are trying to contact vulnerable young members of your campaign staff,
why not tell the head of the campaign, the candidate? I would have told the candidate, but I think it's a judgment.
Why not tell Jeff Sessions, who was also acting on behalf of the campaign? I mean, he was, you know, not only a sitting U.S. senator, he was one of the early adapters of Trumpism, and he was also someone who was a federal prosecutor and knows the law. So there were plenty of people that the FBI could have told about any sort of nefarious
The FBI will say we didn't want the word to get out, but I agree with you. Donald Trump himself should have been told, but I will also suggest this is a judgment call. I don't think it was bizarre that they made this decision, and I'm sure they
don't think it was political.
I hope not.
We got to leave it there. And there's a lot of talk last night about strategy at that campaign-style rally as well. President Trump targeting Democrats on immigration ahead of the midterm elections. So could that strategy work? We will.
President Trump bashing congressional Democratic leaders on immigration during a Make America Great Again rally in Tennessee. That was last night. He also had some things to say about former Governor Phil Bredesen, a Democrat running for retiring Senator Bob Corker's seat in the midterms. Watch.
Our laws are the worst laws of any country anywhere in the world. Catch and release. Did you ever hear? You catch, you take their name, and you release. Democrats want to use it as a campaign issue. And I keep saying, I hope they do. The fact is, the Democrats are lousy politicians. They're lousy on policy. If Bredesen were ever to get elected, he'd do whatever Chuck and Nancy, remember the term? Chuck and Nancy. They don't want the wall. They want open borders. They're more interested in taking care of criminals than they are in taking care of you.
Bredesen set to square off against GOP Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn for the Senate seat in the red state come November. Blackburn has been a vocal supporter of President Trump on the campaign trail. The race is considered to be a toss-up by Fox News. So, Judge, did the president move the meter in Congressman Blackburn's direction? She likes to be called Congressman, by the way.
Okay, you know, I was on the Fox and Friends first. It seems like it was 2 days ago, but it was 5:30 this morning. We had a guest on who runs the meter. You know, here's what independents think, here's what Democrats think, here's what Republicans think. And the bashing of Bredesen did not go over well with independents. He is a Joe Manchin type. He is the type of, listen, I know the president wants Marsha Blackburn in there. He doesn't want to lose. This will be a net loss if Bredesen wins. But he's the type of Democrat you can reach across the aisle and work with. He's as much like Nancy Pelosi as I am.
Judge, I'm going to break in with breaking news right now. We've got the president about to sign the right to try bill into law. This is something that the White House has been pushing, advocating for it. It is for families who can gain access now, terminally ill patients who want to try experimental drug treatments not yet approved by the FDA. This is some way that they can gain access to those drugs. And what this does, too, and the vice president was just on stage before he introduced the president. He's now meeting with some of those families. Thank them for their fight for this, because he said that this puts the access in the hands of all of Americans who are terminally ill. Some groups, like the American Cancer Society, have pushed against this. Some Democrats have pushed against it, saying that it puts those patients who, again, are terminally ill at risk because the FDA may not have vetted these drugs. But right now, the president is about to sign right to try. Let's watch and listen together.
This is, to me, this is a very important moment, a very important day. Been looking forward to this for a long time, along with Senator Ron Johnson. And I will tell you, we worked hard on this. I never understood why it was hard. They've been trying to have it passed for years. I never understood why. Because I'd see people, friends of mine and other people I'd read about, where they'd travel all over the world looking for a cure. And we have the best medical people in the world, but we have trials and we have long time, 12 years, 15 years, even when things look really promising, so many years. And I never understood why they didn't do this, and we worked very hard. And I want to thank Vice President Pence for helping us so much. Mike was in there, and I'd say, Mike, how are we doing in that? We got to get it approved. And he was really working it. And in my State of the Union address 4 months ago, I called on Congress to pass right to try. It's such a great name. Some bills, they don't have a good name. Okay? They really don't. But this is such a great name. From the first day I heard it, it's so perfect. Right to try. And a lot of that trying is going to be successful. I really believe that. I really believe it. So we did it. And we went through the Senate. We went through the House. The House had a bill. The Senate had a bill. We go and mish them together. We got to go back and take votes. And I said, do me a favor, tell me which is the better bill for the people, not for the insurance company, not for the pharmaceutical companies. I don't care about them. I really don't. I couldn't care less. that's the bill I won't tell you which one, but I took the one that was good. They said one in particular was great for the people. Not so good for the others, great for the people. We don't care about the others right now. And it's giving terminally ill patients the right to try experimental life-saving treatments. And some of these treatments are so promising. And we're moving that timeline way up anyway, beyond this. We're moving it way up. But it's still a process that takes years. Now it takes up to 15 years, even 20 years some of these treatments are going. But for many years, patients, advocates, and lawmakers have fought for this fundamental freedom. And as I said, incredibly, they couldn't get it. And there were reasons. A lot of it was business. A lot of it was pharmaceuticals. A lot of it was insurance. A lot of it was liability. I said, so you take care of that stuff, and that's what we did. Today, I'm proud to keep another promise to the American people as I sign the right to try legislation into law. Right? Right? If I looked like that, I would have been president 10 years earlier. If I had that face, if I had that head of hair, I would have been president so long ago. That's great. So I want to thank a couple of people. Secretary Azar is here. Secretary. Please stand up. You have worked so hard on this. Thank you very much. You've really done a great job. But we're going to have another exciting news conference over the next, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks? What do you think? On health care. We have great health care. We got rid of the individual mandate. Without that, we couldn't be doing what we're doing in a few weeks. We're going to have great, inexpensive, but really good health care. And we have 2 plans coming out. We also have, through our great Secretary of Labor, we have a great plan coming out, and that's through associations. And so we're going to have 2 plans coming out. And for the most part, we will have gotten rid of a majority of Obamacare, gotten tremendous. Could have had it done a little bit easier, but somebody decided not to vote for us, so it's one of those things. I want to thank Secretary Azar, and I want to thank Commissioner Gottlieb. Where's Scott? Scott, stand up. Ooh, I like those socks. I like those socks, Scott. And Scott, let me ask you, so it takes years and years to get this approved, right? You're bringing down, beyond this, you're bringing down that period of time. What is the average time now it takes for, a major medicine or cure? What's the average time it takes to go through the system and get an approval?
Depends on medicine, probably 3 to 7 years.
3 to 7. And some go long over 10, right? And you're bringing that down, you're trying to bring that down, for safety. Very good. And you in particular, you're very happy with this, aren't you? You have a lot of good things in the wings that, frankly, if you moved them up, a lot of people would have a great shot, right?
We're trying to get promising things to patients more quickly, Mr. President, under your leadership.
Right. That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Scott. We're very proud of the job you're doing. We're also working very hard in getting the cost of medicine down. And I think people are going to see for the first time ever in this country a major drop in the cost of prescription drugs, right? And, Mr. Secretary, that's already happening, right? It's already happening. You would tell me yesterday that we're seeing a tremendous improvement, and you're going to have some big news. I think we're going to have some of the big drug companies in 2 weeks, and they're going to announce, because of what we did, they're going to announce voluntary, massive drops in prices. So that's great. That's going to be a fantastic thing. We're working on some really great things, aren't we, when you think about it? Ron, pretty good, huh? We could do some of those. Healthcare, drug prices, but this is the baby right now. We would not be here today without the tireless efforts of dedicated members of Congress. That's so true. I want to especially thank Senator Ron Johnson. Stand up, please, Ron. For his tremendous leadership. You know,